With this project, we're going to be working with the watercolor paper. And so I just want to talk a little bit about what is left in your folder, or those papers that you have in your folder. You have 3 different types of paper. The biggest one that you have, this one back here, these are the ones we've been using. This is regular drawing paper, and it's the one you have the most of. So set those aside. We're not using that. And then there's 2 other kinds. The next biggest one has this certain texture to it. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. I don't know if you can see that in the screen, but there's a texture to it. It's a little bit rougher. This is the watercolor paper. You should have 2 or 3 of those. So take one of those out because that's what we're actually going to be using. It's designed to absorb the water a little bit better than other papers. So that's actually what we're going to be using. And then the other one, this is just poster board, and this is what we're going to be using when we use the acrylic paint. So set those aside too. And in this project, you're gonna need a ruler, or really anything that has a straight edge to it. It could be another piece of paper, anything that's got a straight edge. In this example, I'm using just an envelope. So you can use whatever you've got around the house if you don't have a ruler. Because really you can use anything. Now when you're drawing this out, remember a few things. 1, you need to have 30 shapes. 2, in between each shape, you need to have just a little sliver of a blank white space. So let's just say, again, we've been practicing this already, but let's say you have a shape like this. When I work off of this shape, I need to have a little bit of space. So I can't branch off from that side. I need to come back in here and leave just a very small white space. Now, if you look at the examples that I have in a PowerPoint that I've posted in this assignment, I have a lot of student examples from the past few years. And you'll notice that the smaller the white space, the better it looks. If it's a big space, it doesn't look very, very good. So we're kind of shooting for like 1/8 of an inch. So we're talking really small. And let me just go around this shape and leave my little space, and I can branch out from there. What I want you to do is look at the examples from the last exercise in our sketchbook. Look at what you did, decide the best design for you, and plan it out on your paper. I want you to draw lightly. Now I'm drawing a little dark so that you can actually see what I'm doing. You need to draw lightly because the watercolor is not going to cover over this pencil. So your pencil lines need to just barely be there so that you can see them and use them as a guide, but you don't want to really see them. So draw very lightly. And make sure you've got your 30 shapes. I think what I want, and you really want to fill up your space. So I think what I'm going to do, I know I went ahead and started in the middle, but I want to make sure that my gem is really big enough. So I'm going to come out here and really fill this shape out. Okay, that's going to be my outside. And this again is very irregular. Yours can be symmetrical. It's up to you, whatever style you want to do. But I'm going to use that to make sure I go all the way out to the sides and that all the sides kind of line up together. Now I'm going to quickly go through this and draw mine out. All right, so I'm pretty happy with my design. I've got a variety of shapes. It seems pretty balanced. You know, I've got some little pieces over here and over here. I've got some bigger pieces that are spaced out. I think I might want to divide that up a little bit. So let me add a little. Okay, so I'm happy with that. So make sure you have a little bit of space in between all of your shapes, that you also have a space around the very outside because we're going to paint the background black. So you do need a space between the outside of your gem and the background. And then we're ready to move on. 30 shapes, little space. Happy with your design, filling up this whole piece of paper. So there's not a lot of background, and we're good to go. All right, so get your watercolors. So before we start painting, let's make sure we've got a cup of water, our watercolors, our design all planned out. You're gonna need some paper towels or some napkins to kind of blot your brush from time to time. All right, and we're good to go. So what we're gonna be doing within each one of these shapes is what we did practicing in our sketchbook at the beginning of the week. This is completely up to you. You could decide to do your whole gem in one color. You could pick green, which is totally fine, but within each shape, what you're gonna have to do is go from green to light green, green to light green, and kind of mix it up so you have different values meeting. Like, you know, if I did this side dark green and faded it out, I wouldn't really want to do the same thing here and the same thing here because that would all look the same. The cool thing about facets is there's a lot of contrast where you go from one to the other. So let's say I started in this corner and went dark green to light green. Well, maybe in this one I would want to start down here and go dark green to light green. So you're going to mix it up. So you can use the same color in each one, or you can do like we practice also, going from one color into another color. You could go from red into violet. You can really mix it up. Again, look at those examples the students have done in the past. There's a variety of different ways you can approach this. With mine, I think I'm going to pick maybe violet, blue, and green because I really like those colors. They're close to each other on the color wheel and I can blend them easily. But I'm going to play around with them a little bit. So let's look at one of these. I'm going to go ahead and get it wet first. And you'll notice that this paper holds more water. And again, don't forget, when I'm putting water down, I'm not just covering it all, because then when I put my color on, it's going to bleed everywhere. Even though you can't really see what I'm doing, just trust me, I am staying inside the line of that shape, trying to be as careful as possible. Just getting it wet so that when I go to put the color on, it blends easier. Okay. Now with my first one, I'll go from, we'll say, green into blue. So I'll start with green. See how already you can see how it just bursts out. Watercolor paper holds that water so much better than what we were using in our sketchbooks. So I'm going to need a lot more green to get this nice and dark, going right along that edge. Remember, when you're doing straight edges, you want to put that brush down and do not pick it up. Just slowly pull it right down, watching the edge of the brush touch the edge of the line. That's the only way to get a good straight line. Okay, now I'm going to, just with water, I'm going to pull that out and let that start playing around a little bit. Now I'm going to go back and get my blue. And in this, on this side, I'm going to go and very carefully in that corner, fill that corner, and then I'm going to watch the edge of my brush just touch that line I'm going to come back and let that start to blend. And at this point, well, let me go ahead and finish this bottom before I get ahead of myself. Try your best to stay inside that line. Okay, now I can fill in all of this. Now at this point, now that I've filled it in, I can play around a little bit. If you have salt, you can try putting little bits of salt on it, because the salt pulls some of that color and water in to where the little grains are, and you get different effects. If you don't have any salt and don't want to try that, that's fine. That's just an idea. There's all kinds of watercolor techniques, but at this point I can play around with it while it's still wet. Like I could get a little bit of green and just kind of put little dots of green here and there. Or maybe I want to do that with the blue on the other side. Or maybe I don't like that. If you get outside of the lines or you do something that you don't like, grab a paper towel, fold it up, and dab it. If you do it while it's wet, look at how much you can pick up. If you get outside the line, you can dab it really quickly to pull that color right back up. So that's another reason to have these, not only to clean your brush and kind of get the water off if you have too much, or to make sure you have all the color off of your brush before going into another one, but it's good to pick up mistakes. If you have that handy, it's really good. It'll help you out. If an area looks like it's starting to get too dark, like it was dark here and I wanted to get lighter, but it started pooling together, just dry your paintbrush off with your paper towel or napkin. Come in with a dry brush and look, you can pull that water right up and lighten it again. Again, just to show you how watercolor paper is amazing, and once you have enough water on here and you come in and put a color, what can happen. I have my water on and watch, when as soon as I touch with my paint, isn't that cool? Just the way it bursts out with color, and see how it's staying inside that shape because I did not go outside of my lines with my water when I was trying to load that shape up with water. So play around with it, see what kind of effects you can get with your watercolor. You know, mixing analogous colors together, watching them blend is really fun. I could do this all day. All right, now my gem is done. It's still drying, so I'm going to be kind of careful, but the last thing that I want you to do, or really second to last, is go around this very outside line and fill in the background with black. Now it doesn't have to be a solid black. It can be, you know, kind of like how this looks, where you see where pools of water had formed and dried and where certain pigments collected. And I think that's one of the special things about watercolors, is you get this really interesting effect. I mean, it pools and kind of looks like little crystals itself, the way some of the pigment dries inside of these areas. So play around with your background like you played around with the color. When that dries, make sure it is dry, and take an eraser and erase any of your pencil marks. If you do it while it's wet, it's going to peel that paper right off.